Hi, I'm Mary Ann,
And I'm Andre.
and we just wanted to invite you into our conversation that we've been having this week about the death and resurrection of Jesus. And what does it mean?
And what does it mean, not just kind of theoretically, but what does it mean for the way we experience life, the way we live, a way of being? Because I think so many people, all Christians have got like a theological position as to what does the death of Christ mean. They've got the theological position of what does his resurrection mean. But I want us to kind of delve into that other unique perspective, and that is, can death and resurrection be a way of being? So is there a way in which we don't just look back at the historical event and imagine how we were included in it? That might be good and valid in some way, but rather how does this way of laying down my life and finding new life, how can that be an ongoing practice?
Think of Jesus introducing us to a whole new way of being human. That it's a way of life, a way of being that is challenged and expanded.
And there's so many kind of scriptures in which Jesus invites us to follow him into this practice of laying down your life and finding it. I think, many of the people that we communicate with have used terminology such as finding your identity in Christ. Finding your true self in Christ. And unfortunately, much of the focus is still on finding and defining. There's kind of an allergic reaction to the idea of dying
or losing.
losing. And there's something very beautiful that we miss out on when we ignore or attempt to just avoid the terminology of losing, of dying. There's beautiful treasures locked up in those ideas as well.
I think, this week in particular, I've been meditating again on that passage in John 20. I think it's John 20, maybe, I think around verse 17. In any case, you'll know it well, the resurrection scene where Mary arrives at the tomb and Jesus isn't there. And, she's weeping and distraught. And just to give context to that, I was thinking of how this is a woman whose life has been transformed by Jesus. The accounts, I think in Luke, says that she's been exorcised of 7 demons. So whatever that means, this is a woman that's been tormented in her life. She's encountered Jesus and has been healed and delivered from that torment. She's a disciple of Jesus. She's, there's evidence of her even supporting his ministry. And she is one of the first people to be at to witness the resurrection. But you can imagine her being there with her life, this very real experience of transformation and healing. And she arrives, and that Jesus is gone. It's like he's not there. And then he appears to her, but she doesn't recognize him. And his words to her is, Mary, don't cling to me, don't hold on to me. And I was just so struck by those words, because that is so often what we want to do. We want to hold on.
Yes.
We want to cling to the Jesus that we've known, and all that represents. And I just felt such an invitation in his words, not of this aloofness of don't hold on to me, but rather this invitation of, Mary, there is so much more going on to me than you've ever known. There's so much more to you that is way larger than your current experience or perspective.
Sure.
And then he goes on to say, tell them that I ascend to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. It's like there's this expansiveness in the presence and the life of Jesus that he wants to awaken her to, which I think is the same as where Paul speaks of, we knew Christ according to the flesh. We don't judge any man according to the flesh. We knew Christ according to the flesh, but we know him thus no longer. It's that grain of wheat that Jesus speaks about, that is,
it's got to fall into the ground and die.
And you think of that kernel inside, the outer layer of that grain of wheat that needs room to produce much fruit, to become larger than.
So that takes us right into the heart of what is the experience in our lives of dying and resurrection. And I'm going to attempt one description of the experience, because it is an experience that's so rich and so inexhaustible that we can speak about it from many directions. But here's a definition or a way of understanding it that I hope is helpful. I think everything that we experience, that we think, that we say, is in a process of interpretation. Both of us can be present at the same event, yet experience it differently, because even experience is an interpretation. The moment impresses upon us and has an influence upon us. We can listen to the same band playing music, and you might give attention to the bass guitarist in a way that I don't. And so you experience that music differently. And so everything in this moment is having an influence upon us, and most of it is unconscious, in which we filter the information and we then interpret the information that comes through to produce your unique perspective and experience. Now, part of that process in which we experience the moment is we bring to it our history and our expectation. So we make sense of our world, of our experience, of our day, because we have this context of, who am I? Where do I come from and where am I going? And that whole context shapes the way in which we experience this moment. And so part of understanding what it means to die is to let go of that sense of self, to let go of the thoughts, the categories, the history, the memory, and even the anticipations, and have a radical openness to the rawness of this moment that is uninterpreted, and to experience it as closely as possible to just what it is prior to our interpretation. And so that is one way of describing this. If you want to follow me, you've got to lose yourself. Why? Because it is in letting go all of those structures, all of that sense of identity, sense of who I am, that I can open myself up to a newness of experience, an experience that might be much larger than what can be contained within those structures of who I am. So you went on to say that is even true of our experience of Christ, because most people can maybe, make peace with the fact that maybe there's something more to me than what I've imagined there is, and the only way to access that more is to let go.
Yeah.
So that already is a big contrast, that the focus is not find your identity in Christ, but rather the focus is lose yourself and your sense of identity in Christ. But now you've taken it into another level and saying even our ideas of Christ can limit our experience of Christ. Yeah, like that.
And what Christ is revealing is a reality that's way larger than your current experience of Him.
Yeah. Which is inexhaustible. It's not that he cannot be known, but He's infinitely knowable.
Yeah.
And so whatever you've come to know and experience of Christ up to now, don't let that become the boundaries or the limitation of how you experience Christ going forward. And in our experience, if we want to expand our experience of God, we've unavoidable part of that process of having a deeper experience is letting go of how we've experienced Christ up to now. And that's the difficult thing. People feel like I'm losing myself, I'm losing God in this process. And to an extent, that's true.
Yes.
But it is that very difficult gateway of losing that introduces you to gaining something more.
And I think how beautifully that is illustrated in Mary's experience, because it's in that almost grief and the loss of the Jesus that she knew.
Yes.
She had to go through the depth of that to be able to experience the greater reality of what this resurrection means.
Yes.
And you think of the men on the road to Emmaus, it's like the story that they had, and even the expectation, because sometimes it's an expectation we have of the future, of how the story should unfold, how it should look, and the story that they believed left them sad and disappointed. And it was only in that encounter with the living, who they also didn't recognize at first, but this encounter across the table, in the breaking of the bread, in that revelation, that they suddenly understood and they saw for the first time that this reality, this story that we've believed, is way larger than how we've experienced it up until now. And in fact, the story is more about us than we ever realized, and more about the expansive, beautiful story that we have to live and to tell and to invite others into.
So it's almost like if you think you know the gospel comprehensively, it's obviously very obvious that you don't.
Yes.
If you think you found Christ and know him comprehensively, you don't.
Yes.
Because if you've truly encountered Christ, you know that this relationship is inexhaustible. If you've grasped the heart of the gospel, you'll know that it's indefinable.
Sure.
It's something that always expands you. I think of Jean-Luc Marion, the philosopher that spoke about saturated phenomena, which is this kind of experience that is larger than your capacity to contain.
Yes.
And the mark, the characteristics of this saturated kind of experience is that it's always more, not just what you can contain in experience, but it bursts beyond the boundaries of your language and your definitions and your expectations. And it's beautifully illustrated in the Gospels, because whenever they start speaking about the resurrection, their language becomes almost contradictory and confused. It's like, we recognized Jesus, but we didn't. He walked with us, but he disappeared. I touched him, but he said, don't touch me.
Yes.
It's like this experience that is just beyond the capacity for language to have to be a container for it. Rather, this experience continually stretches our language, continually challenges us to allow our concepts and our thoughts to be transformed by it.
Yes.
It's an experience that does not simply fulfill our desires and anticipations, but transforms it.
Yeah. I was just reminded, this John, so many passages, but John 9, where he speaks about, to say that you see, how great is that blindness,
Yes.
and it's that whole, at the moment you start trying to put definitions and boundaries on that saturated, it's like you see it and you experience it and you take it, and now we want to define it and say, this is what it is, and we have exhausted it. That you don't see.
Yes.
That's not it.
Yes.
It's always more than that. And
So, dear friends and new friends who's listening, we just want to encourage you that unless the death and resurrection of Christ is an experience that continues in you, it has no relevance and no life. And so you are invited into this way of being.
yes,
Into this kind of life where you can let go of who you are, of who you think Christ is, of who you think God is. And in that letting go, find a treasure, an inexhaustible treasure of being, of experiencing yourself, creation, others, and God in a way that is continually new. The new creation is not just something that happened in the past that we are now becoming familiar with. The new creation is new all the
every
time.
moment.
His mercies are new every morning.
Yes.
Bless you,
Beautiful. The
friends.
resurrection continues in us.
Bye.
Bye.